Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Richard Kurin.
Well, thank you very much. The book I've been talking about is called The Smithsonian's History of American 101 Objects, and I work for the Smithsonian, and for much of the last decade, I oversaw all the museums and all the research centers of our national museums, which is a pretty big job. But today I wanted to talk about why we do that work and what we're doing overseas, and kind of give you a backstage kind of look at work that the Smithsonian does that not many people know about. So, you know the national, I think, can you see the screens over there? Okay. This one's pretty washed out, but National Mall of the United States, right? Capitol, Washington, Monument, White House, and all the national museums. And the Smithsonian takes care of about 156 million things in those museums. A lot of stuff. And that's what it looks like behind the scenes of the Smithsonian. Again, taking care and conserving all of these treasures. And we have to take care of those treasures of American life, from Edison's light bulb to the Spirit of St. Louis, to everything you can imagine. During World War II, the Smithsonian, as well as the National Gallery, the Harvard Art Museum, and others, got involved because Eisenhower and Roosevelt did something that nobody else did, which was they were very concerned as leaders of the World War II effort in saving those treasures that were being looted by the Nazis and architectural and historical treasures that were being destroyed. And you know that through the film The Monuments Men and the book by the same name. We continue that work amazingly today at the Smithsonian. So we're involved with colleagues in Germany and internationally. If you remember a few years ago, there was that guy in Munich, Gerlit, and they found like 1,200 paintings and that they thought were looted, and they asked the Smithsonian, could you do the provenance research? Can you help track that down so we can return those paintings? And at the Smithsonian, we had the records of all those art sales in Europe during the early 1900s, so we were able to help the Germans track those paintings down. That's called provenance research, and we do it for all objects in museums, and most accredited and legitimate museums do that for all their objects to make sure they're not stolen and they're not coming from places they don't belong. And indeed, they're still surviving. There's still 3 surviving monuments men and 1 monuments woman from World War II, and 2 years ago, they received the Congressional Gold Medal from congressional leaders, and then that medal then came to the Smithsonian to honor that ongoing work that they did. So I got involved in this because of the failure of our country to act in 2 key circumstances. One, when the U.S. invaded Iraq in 2003, U.S. troops went in. Remember, we were getting rid of Saddam. The U.S. was there to help the Iraqi people, bring democracy, bring down a dictator, but yet we saw the looting of the treasures of the Iraqi Museum. It gave Americans a black eye around the world. And, you know, it kind of opened up an irony. Here we are to honor the very people that we're trying to save from Saddam, but, oh, you have a 5 or 10,000-year-old civilization, and people are looting it, and the museum's being destroyed. So many vases. So we got a black eye for that. And then similarly, in Hurricane Katrina, a lot of the museums and archives that held, the heritage, the jazz heritage, the Afro-Caribbean heritage of Louisiana and New Orleans was deeply affected by Hurricane Katrina, and there was really no plan by FEMA or anybody else to do anything about those treasures. And all of a sudden, you see this stuff disappearing in the midst of a natural disaster. So both conflict and natural disaster, really no plans afoot. When the earthquake hit Haiti in 2010, that was devastating. About 300,000 people died, 1 million people were homeless, hundreds of thousands of people injured. And if you think about the treasures of Haiti, Haiti's not a rich country, very poor economically, but very rich culturally. We wouldn't have the United States as it is now if it wasn't for Haiti. Because Haiti mounted a revolution against Napoleon to achieve their independence and abolish slavery, Napoleon could not defend the Louisiana Territory. That's why he sold it to Thomas Jefferson at bargain rates. Okay? So we owe half our country at that time to the Haitians and their rebellion. The Haitians had a very strong sense of identity, and probably some of you watched on TV after that earthquake. I certainly did, and you saw Haitians in light of that earthquake. How did they survive? You know, their houses had toppled, people, relatives injured, killed, and on the streets of Port-au-Prince, they sang. And it gave them strength. And I think a lot of people admired the resilience of Haitian people to go through the hell they were going through to do that. Of course, the U.S. response, among other nations, was first to send, you know, food and medicine and tents and tarps and, you know, the usual thing you need to survive. But we had worked at the Smithsonian very closely with the Haitians for several decades. And they turned to us and they said, well, what about the culture? Because that's our wealth. We don't have economic wealth here, but our culture is our wealth. It gives us a sense of identity, resilience, a sense of who we are. And so if you take a look at that picture, that's the National Cathedral of Haiti before the earthquake. That's after. It's like a bomb was dropped on it. This is the Episcopal Church, founded in 1862. It was a center of abolition, not in Haiti, for Americans. Americans would hold up, abolitionists would hold up Haiti as a beacon of freedom. And this church had murals painted in the mid-19th century documenting Haitian Christianity and their fight for liberation and freedom. This is after. 14 murals, 3 survived. This is the biggest museum, the Nader Gallery in Haiti, with paintings, about 20,000 paintings documenting Haiti's artistic expression, history, culture, and so on. Here's George Nader with the museum afterwards. So the first impulse, of course, was after taking care of their injured and burying their deceased, the Haitians try to rescue their culture, just like we would in Washington. And I imagine sitting in the Smithsonian, like, what if we had a disaster in Washington? All the museums, the Library of Congress, everything, the White House, everything would be collapsed. At some point, we'd probably say, you know, we should pull out the Star-Spangled Banner from the American History Museum. We got that Declaration of Independence at the archives. We kind of should pull that out and save that because that's us. And so we ended up talking to Haitians, and as the just in the immediate aftermath of the earthquake, to kind of prove our point, Haitian artists were painting the earthquake. Earthquake art became another genre because it was a way of processing the trauma. And so we put together a coalition. There were a number of Haitian leaders, American leaders, and so on. I went to Haiti right after the earthquake, had the opportunity to bring it back. I met with General Keane, the head of Southcom. We had, at that time, about 15,000 soldiers in Haiti. We said we needed to mount something, but we needed the infrastructure to do it. General Keane said, well, I'd love to help the Smithsonian, help the Haitians, you know, because it's good for us. We have all these American troops there, and people will respect us as Americans if we're helping them. After all, we've invaded their country a few times. It shows that we appreciate their culture. That's good for our soldiers. He said, but I need an order. Somebody has to give me an order. Military, Department of Defense, unfortunately, does not take orders from the Smithsonian. I came back from Haiti that morning, and Michelle Obama was donating her inaugural gown to the Smithsonian. And so we had the opportunity to brief her on it. She said, this is a great thing, called over to the State Department. First Lady of Haiti was actually visiting that day. She came over to my office. All of a sudden, we had a project. And all of a sudden, General Keane got an order from the State Department. Help the Smithsonian. That's a good order to get. So, we were down and assessing it. Now, I was inspired by this. I didn't really get the idea for doing this. I was frustrated. I knew we had to do something. But I got my inspiration from this woman here, she's outlined in red, Cori Wagner. She really was a monuments woman. She worked for the Minneapolis Institute of Art, but during the Iraqi invasion, she was called up in the reserve, and she went to Baghdad. And she's the one that really saved that museum and restored that museum. I said, she knows what she's doing. And also, she talked military, which was good. So we started putting together a project. with the Haitians, and as I say, General Keane, Southcom, U.S. Department of Defense was very helpful. And we put together a project with us and the Haitians in order to figure out how we were going to save all that culture that was destroyed in the rubble and so on. So we planned that out. We got a lot of sponsors. Actually, the first money that came in was from the Broadway League in New York. All the theaters in New York. Why did they give money to Haiti? They were able to make the cause, and it was Margot Lyon, who was on the President's Committee, who was instrumental in the Broadway League. She's a Broadway producer. I think she did Hairspray or some of those. Anyway, Margot basically said, the Broadway people said, look, after 9/11, which was our disaster in the United States and New York, it was so important to get Broadway back up again. It showed we were not dead. And so showing Broadway was up again was a signal that, you know, we were resilient. And they made the connection that the earthquake in Haiti that had been so devastating there was kind of like their 9/11. And coming back up and recovering Haitian culture was important for them psychologically. So they basically took a buck off every ticket sold on Broadway, and they gave it to us, and we were able to pay for this project, and then later got some federal money. So we took over a UN building in Port-au-Prince in Haiti. We had to bring in generators from Canada. We had to bring in all our equipment and put together conservation studios. We worked with our Haitian colleagues to manage the project, and trying to see what this looks like. Oh yeah, we had to get trucks. We had to bring in registrars. We had to hire some guys with Uzis, to protect, because we were getting all Haitian cultural treasures in one place together. We sent about 70 people from the Smithsonian, conservators and others, and then we put out a call across the country. And so we had conservators from the Seattle Art Museum and the Yale Art Museum and museums and institutions around the country to come to Haiti to help people save their culture. And from the very beginning, we saw as our task to train a generation of Haitians, because there was very little knowledge of conservation and actually how to do this. And so we ended up training about 150 Haitians in conservation. Now, if you look at this is the Centre Art. This is the main teaching center and a strong collection, about 9,000 works of Haitian art, totally in the ruins. However, we were able to talk instead of the Army Corps of Engineers in Haiti with the Japanese Corps of Engineers. So we got the UN troops, they're in blue hats, our folks are in yellow hats, and basically they brought in heavy equipment and helped us at this site pull out about 1,100 sculptures that were buried under that building. And then, it was working with the Haitians and Haitian artists to teach conservation. So you're getting, the Haitians do those oil barrel sculptures, the kind of cut metal. So you get something like that, it looks rusted like that, and then cleaning it up and conserving it. And putting storage, establishing, cleaning up things from mold and so on. This is the National Archives of Haiti. That's what it looked like after the earthquake. That's what it looks like now. Okay? It's amazing what conservators do. I work with a museum. We have about 350 conservators at the Smithsonian. What they do is magic. This was a famous Haitian painting, Hippolyte. This was from that Nader museum that was totally leveled. It was in the rubble. That's what it looked like. It was in 9 pieces. That's what it looked like restored. This came, that's not showing. Okay. Here's a painting that was in the equivalent of the Haitian White House, the presidential palace. It was in 3 pieces. You could see the condition of it. And that's it restored. So the idea was to take these treasures, recover, stabilize, teach Haitians, and put it back together. This was probably our major project. This was the Last Supper. 3 of the murals from this church survived. And this was really a Haitian national treasure. We had to build scaffolding because the walls were about to fall down. And we literally had to clean these murals. These are larger than life-size murals. This was our fancy plan to cut the murals down off the wall, We worked with the Getty Institute, Smithsonian scientists to figure out a way of doing this so we wouldn't crumble it off. Now, I'm a Jewish kid from Queens. I had to call the head of the Episcopal Church for North America, Mary Shorey at the time. And I said, because it's their property, it's the Episcopal Church. And she said, Dr. Kurin, I trust you, but, you know, like, what's the problem? I said, look, we're going to try to pull these murals, they're like frescoes, off the wall. And I said, did you ever see that scene in Mel Brooks' History of the World, Part 2? She started laughing. She said, I said, you remember that scene? Moses comes down from the mountain, and he says, oh, people of Israel, I give you the 10 commandments. I said, we're trying to pull these murals off the wall. I want them to come off in pieces like Texas and Pennsylvania, and I worry that when we pull them off, it'll be like Rhode Island and Delaware. They'll all be crumbling. She said, go ahead, we trust you. We ended up pulling off these murals, and now those murals are in 147 fragments, and when they rebuild that church, those murals will go back in, because of the effort of Americans working with Haitians to preserve their culture. We wrote about it in Smithsonian Magazine, we had websites, we did a documentary, we did an exhibit on the mall in Washington, and again, I love it. There's this one poster, I don't know if you can, it's hard to read, but it's done by kids in Washington to the Haitian kids and saying, don't worry, help is on the way. What a statement. What a statement. So I did a book on it, Saving Haitian Heritage. We did a documentary for TV, and we continue to do that work. So we send a lot of Haitians come up. They work at the Smithsonian, and they work at Yale, which is a partner in this, in giving advanced training for the Haitians so they could continue to do this conservation work. And then Ben Stiller, who's done a lot of work in Haiti, ended up giving us money to establish a permanent center at the university in Port-au-Prince. This is it, so the Haitians can continue doing the work on a full-time basis, because another disaster is going to happen at some point and they're going to need it. So as we were doing the Haiti project, Superstorm Sandy hit New York. So our New York colleague says, wait, we helped you help the Haitians, how about helping us in Sandy? Good stuff, what's good comes around. And so the Smithsonian and other museums, we got together with the Met, Natural History, MoMA, and others, and worked on a lot of studios and a lot of archives in New York, saving those collections from Martha Graham's dance costumes to archives and so on. And as that was happening, then you had Islamic extremists burning manuscripts in Timbuktu. Remember that? Knocking down buildings, knocking down mosques, knocking down shrines, and burning manuscripts. And so Samuel Sidibe, the head of the National Museum of Mali, calls me up. We would work with him. Richard, you got to come and help us. We need help. So again, the Smithsonian is there. We provided security, generators, conservation, and training so people could. These are manuscripts that were written largely in the 16 and 1700s. They were written in Latin, Hebrew, and Arabic. They're in languages of different, they really document culture at that time in Africa. And you had these Islamic extremists that wanted to destroy and cover that up. And so they were trying to destroy that. So we helped the Malians with saving those manuscripts. And then there was a bomb that went off at the Islamic Museum in Egypt, and they called us, and we joined with the Met, and we said, okay, we'll help with that. So now we're in the business. You know, and more recently there was that earthquake in Nepal. And again, here's Cori Wagner, the monuments woman, out training Nepali troops and police and working with conservators to help them with that. So our biggest project probably has been in Iraq. And as you know, and as you've seen on TV, you know, the blowing up, ISIS blowing up of sites, and then in Syria with Assad's barrel bombs. So this is a center for conservation in Erbil. It's a collaborative venture between the Smithsonian, the Iraqi government, the Kurdish government, the State Department. And basically, it's at this facility that we work training people from all over Iraq. We've probably trained about now 500 people. and people learning conservation, collection management, how to take care of stuff. You're trying to train people to do it under the best of circumstances, but people are trying to do it here in the face of wartime and the purposeful destruction. In Syria, it's even more complicated because of the opposition in Syria. It's Assad, actually, and the government that's dropping barrel bombs on places. So you got destruction from two ends. You got ISIS destroying things, and then you got the Assad government bombing his opponents. So you take a place like Aleppo, which is a World Heritage Site. We have forts from Crusaders, and you have Islamic shrines and everything, and Assad's government dropping barrel bombs. This is what it looks like. And you've seen those pictures of ISIS. This is out at Nimrud on the right, and on the left. That was a video that went, I think, pretty viral. ISIS actually took a video of its guys taking sledgehammers to 5,000-year-old Assyrian sculptures. Now, if you're a museum person, this is stuff that you put in cases that you spend your lifetime trying to preserve and understand, and here's people taking sledgehammers to it and busting it up. And so, you know, the issue is what can we do about this? So, for one thing, ISIS was not only destroying material, but also looting. It was basically destroy what you can't move, and what you can move, see if you can sell. So the Smithsonian joins with other partners, with Interpol, with the International Council of Museums, with the FBI, with others, to put out a red list so that you get looted stuff coming from Iraq and parts of Syria into Turkey, into Jordan, other places, and sold as far as Singapore, US, probably the second or third largest market for illegal stuff coming into the country. And that money, you know, ISIS loots, they get the money. What do they do with it? They buy guns and ammunition and other things to terrorize people. So we work very closely on trying to identify that, identify those looting routes, and how that happens. Now, I'm an anthropologist by heart, so, you know, when I think of looting, I think of like Indiana Jones. Remember that film? You know, Indiana Jones, 5 guys go out in the hill, you know, with a pickaxe and a shovel, dead of night. You know, let me dig up a hole. Maybe I'll find a bracelet and I'll sell it. ISIS was not looting that way. It wasn't like 5 guys in a pickup truck at night digging a pit. This looks like craters on the moon. These are looting pits. A very famous site. And basically, what ISIS does is it had a ministry of looting. These are looting permits. Okay? ISIS thought it was a state, you know, with a real state, like with a bureaucracy and taxation and everything. So these are looting permits, and people do RFPs, requests for proposals. They compete for the right to loot a site, and then they have to pay ISIS a 20% tax on what they make. So, you know, Allied forces have intercepted these looting permits, and then you start studying these looting permits to figure out, okay, who's getting the contract? And they're big contracts. It's not with shovels. It's with, you know, backhoes and tractors and bulldozers and so on. And we saw a lot of goods emerging in Lebanon, in the Middle East, goods from Palmyra. Remember Palmyra, watching that get blown up. But again, a lot of stuff that was movable ending up on markets. The Smithsonian ended up with a program with the State Department Homeland Security, so we've now trained over 500 Homeland Security inspectors, Customs and Border Patrol people, so they can recognize these goods. So when somebody is coming into a U.S. you know, port or airport, here you are, you're coming into Kennedy in New York, and you know, they find a suitcase, and you think, oh, this is a tchotchke, and this is nice, and this is a souvenir, but it's really like something that's been looted from Dar Europos, and you know, it's very valuable, it's an antiquity. So it's been training agents to recognize the authenticity of goods and prevent it. You also have you remember the Yazidis that were stranded in northern Iraq for a while. Iraq really went after and destroying a lot of sites, destroying churches, destroying mosques, temples, shrines, and so on. What people don't realize is that the populations of both Syria and particularly northern Iraq were really multicultural. You still had Zoroastrians, still have Jewish populations. Mosul is in the Bible. The tomb of Jonah is in Mosul. St. George's shrine is in Mosul. This was very much a multicultural, mixed population with a long history of interrelationships, sometimes very tough, sometimes people trying to beat people over the head, but at other times people living at peace with each other. And that's what ISIS was trying to destroy. That notion of a multicultural, multi-religious, multilingual population living together is a dangerous idea. And it's not much different if you think about what happened. You look at South Africa under apartheid. There was an effort by the apartheid government, too, to bulldoze places like District 6 that had Jewish, Greek, Italian, African mixed populations because it was a dangerous idea. So people are destroying more than stone. They're destroying an idea about people respecting and living together with each other. What we have is we had the Yazidis and others taking refuge. A lot of people in Iraq and Syria ended up taking refuge at heritage sites because they thought they would be safer. And so it was very important for us to start teaching people that were refugee populations in Iraq and Syria, where are you? Because it's not your religion. There's a fort built by the Crusaders from Europe during one of the Crusades. That's where you're staying. So what was the history of that? So at least people would understand that. We ended up doing a lot of training. I'm very proud. The woman pictured here was a refugee from Syria. She was the deputy director of archaeology in Syria. She fled to the United States. And the guy is from our American Indian Museum on the Mall. And here they are in southern Turkey teaching Syrians how to pack up and protect stuff from ISIS and Assad. I think that's a good story. And here's one case in the Mara Museum where we work with the Syrians to basically protect. These are Roman and Byzantine mosaics. Okay, so go back about 2,000 years and 1,000 years. And they're in this museum. We can't move them. We just can't move them. And so how do we protect them? So we ended up working on a system. I'm sorry, I thought, hello? We try to protect them. It's dark. Think we can get it back? The what? Upper right, the blank? Oh, there it is. Okay. So we try to protect these sandbags. This museum was bombed, and yet you can see the murals protected here. You can see sand all over because the sandbags exploded, but it protected the murals. And so we've done this in many cases. We've helped people bury things. So they're out in the desert, they're buried, they're protected, and then you got to kind of try to bring them back. What we do is we work with the National Science Foundation, the American Advancement for Science, and other bodies, University of Pennsylvania. This is monitoring a site. We monitor from satellite what ISIS does every day. We were doing this for years. Now less so, less need to do it. This is the site, this is the tomb of Jonah. And basically what you witnessed over time was ISIS destroying the tomb, then bringing in trucks, taking out the rubble, leveling it over so it never existed. And then that's how you erase people's history. So really very, very sure. What we've done is joined together networks of academics and scholars and researchers from around the world to try to study the choreography of cultural destruction. When does culture become an issue? How does it work? What do people do first? What does it look like? How is it? Because this is all planned. It's not like it's just happenstance. And so we've been able to now code different events in Syria and in Iraq and try to get an understanding of when do religious sites come into play, when do historic sites come into play, when do libraries and museums, what's the order of battle in trying to wipe out people's culture, and how do we understand that? And if we understand that, maybe we can do something to prevent it. We've done a lot, us and others, in terms of advertising and trying to get the word out about this attack on history, on culture, and the intolerance it represents, and working in different forums like UNESCO and other talks to try to mobilize the international community. This was Davos 2 years ago. We also did stuff last year at Davos, looking at and trying to get world leaders to understand, because cultural, the economy, politics, war, those are the top ones, health, culture's, 6th, 7th, or 8th on the list, but nonetheless important in giving people a spirit, again, of identity, of who they are, and an understanding of tolerance and respect. So doing a lot at Davos. And then there's a guy from California, Ed Royce, a Republican who joined with a Democrat from New York to co-sponsor a bill. Obama signed it before he left office, and it was a bill to preserve and protect cultural heritage. And for the first time, it actually got the U.S. I mean, the Monuments Men were arose not as a complicated law or anything. It was a program that Roosevelt and Eisenhower put in place. But this was, for the first time, it actually has the military talking to the Smithsonian, talking to nonprofit groups and the World Monuments Fund and others to figure out how indeed to save heritage in both natural disaster and in wartime situations. So that's been very important in at least getting U.S. government collaboration and the collaboration of a lot of the NGO groups to get together over this. So we're still training people from the military. We do training at Fort Dix and Fort Bragg to figure out, how to protect cultural heritage in tough times. We do a lot of training. We did one in D.C. We, when you do these kind of things, we did one with soldiers in the command from Fort Belvoir, which is right next to Washington, D.C., where we staged a simulated attack on the Capitol. And then we had various curators and conservators from not only the Smithsonian, from around the world, figuring out how do you work together? How do you work with the military? How do you evacuate a museum under wartime and so on? A lot of people don't know. During World War II, Roosevelt was very worried that the Nazis would bomb Washington. So we actually evacuated the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, National Gallery, put together a lot of its artwork, sent it into to Lynchburg, Virginia, built a facility there. Some things went to Fort Knox, other things went to caverns in Virginia. Smithsonian evacuated a lot of its treasures. So, how do you do that now? And when you think about the recent scare in Hawaii, how much time do you have? 18 minutes to evacuate a museum, save lives. So it's really working in terms of how do you deal with some of these problems. And so it was really putting together conservators with the military, peacekeepers, first responders, and so on, to figure out how to work together. Late in 2016, France, François Hollande, the outgoing president of France, organized a conference of world leaders in Abu Dhabi. And the idea was, if you're doing this, how do you get the money for it? We had depended, when we did Haiti, on the Broadway League. How do you do this? And do governments have money? Is there some kind of fund? And so we started thinking of this in the same way you think about Doctors Without Borders, or you think about the Red Cross. We have some fund, there's money in the kitty, there's a crisis, people have their duffel bag packed, they're ready to go, and you have some money that you can use to do that. So in March of 2017, less than a year ago, we put together a conference in Paris. François Hollande committed $30 million. We ended up getting pledges of about, now it's over $80 million. And that gives us a fund, an international fund, that we can then tap so we don't have to raise money during a crisis you can actually have money in the pot ahead of time to organize for it. So I was in Iraq last year during the invasion of Mosul. And as we were preparing for the invasion of Mosul, the issue was, well, how do we help? We're doing all this monitoring of ISIS. We know what's happening. So we end up preparing these guides. There's a guide to Mosul. And we distributed thousands and thousands of these to U.S. Special Forces, to the Iraqi army, to the Peshmerga. And they're small like this because they fit in a uniform pocket. And basically they're in English, Arabic, and Kurdish. And what they do is they then have maps and photographs and like a street view like in Google. So it basically says, here's a church. Don't bomb it. Here's an archaeological site. Here's the coordinates. Here's the GPS coordinates. Don't blow it up. Let's not have the Americans or the Iraqis or the Kurds inadvertently destroying what a group like ISIS is destroying on purpose. So these were very, very handy, and they actually helped save a lot of things that otherwise would have been blown up. Now, that said, ISIS was still blowing up stuff up to the last minute. Right now, we're working, this is Nimrud on the left, and on the right is the Nebi Yunus. Nebi is prophet, Yunus is Jonah. So that's under Jonah's tomb, where we found remains in antiquities, and at Nimrud, which is a huge site, an Assyrian site. Again, ISIS blew up stuff at the end. And right now, in terms of reconnoitering it, it's trying to figure out, okay, how do we then recover something from it? Can we put Humpty Dumpty back together again? Can we take what's blown up? Mosul Museum, remember the guys with the sledgehammers busting the statues? This is what the Mosul Museum looks like today. Just devastated. And so one of our tasks is to see if we can put that museum, recover the artifacts, and put that museum together again as a symbol, again, of resilience and also continual education about the culture and heritage of Syria. And then after Mosul, there was Raqqa in Syria. That's where ISIS had retreated to. And again, putting together a booklet for special forces, the allied forces, and so on to do that. We also, with our partners from the Blue Shield and others, basically provide no-strike coordinates to when we're bombing a place. So we don't inadvertently bomb, again, something that shouldn't be bombed. So this has been a very cooperative American, Iraqi, American, Syrian effort. People believe that there's something to be gained by preserving our heritage so we can understand it, so we can learn from it and use that as an example. And right now, again, our team, as we speak, is working in Mosul today. And working on some of these sites is not easy because you have to demine them first. ISIS has left bombs, IEDs and others, and so you don't want your conservators being blown up. So you got to do that. It's a matter of doing, using drones to image a site and figure out where stuff is, and then coming up with a plan and the money to, again, see if we can restore some of that heritage. Now, as we're doing it, working in Syria and Iraq, we got hit by hurricanes in this country. So in Texas, in Florida, Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands. So in South Texas, we sent teams from the Smithsonian, the National Archives, other institutions, because, just imagine, I don't know if any of you have been in disaster, but you're in a disaster, your house is flooded, you got to grab something. What do you grab? You grab your big screen TV? Probably not. You just, grab a kitchen chair? Probably not. You're going to grab a family photo album, a Bible, a picture of a loved one, whatever it is, it's going to be something that marks you as a person who has a history and an identity. And so what we did is we worked with a lot of people, particularly in South Texas, with the flooding, which came on really rapidly, working with people with their family photographs. So we put up tables in FEMA tents. We have a partnership with FEMA on cultural heritage. So in all those recovery centers, we'd have these tables, and we would show people how they could save their stuff. Now, it's amazing. If you think like you have your family photographs and that, and it's all wet and muddy and everything, all you have to do is like dip them actually in distilled water. And you keep giving them a bath, and the photographs will separate, and they'll eventually be okay. If you have a Bible that's all wet and soaked and everything, put it in a Ziploc bag and put it in your freezer for 6 months, and it'll be fine. Okay? Well, so what we did is we used household materials that you can buy at any store and showed people how you could save your treasures. So that's very important. And right now, we're working in Puerto Rico because we got a call from the Puerto Rican museums, and just like, again, you've seen on TV. You have all these works. Puerto Rico is a place where Columbus visited. I mean, the archives go back like almost 500 years. You got artwork on paper and other things. The biggest thing is they can't run air conditioning. They can't run humidifiers, so mold grows on everything. And you're watching hundreds of years of history, of artistic production die in front of you. So they called us up. They said, can the Smithsonian help? What can you do? And the biggest museum in San Juan had a generator, but they had no fuel. And working with the FEMA bureaucracy is challenging, to say the least. So we put together a fund at the Smithsonian. We got it down to Puerto Rico. And what happened is the biggest museum in San Juan, Museum of Puerto Rican Art, then took in the collections of other museums and archives. Said, bring everything, to one place, because we can't put generators and fuel in, 18 different places. It just gets too complex. Bring your stuff there. And right now they're doing that. And we've been running workshops. A Smithsonian team just came back yesterday from Puerto Rico, where we've been working with people across the island to give them supplies, equipment, and training so they can save their collections over the next few months. And I'm heading out to Puerto Rico in a few weeks, and then the United States Virgin Islands also having a big problem. You don't hear about the Virgin Islands as much less population, but nevertheless, also looking at a heritage, that goes back at least five centuries. So we continue to do that work. And again, it's one of the things that happens at the Smithsonian, and we've been called upon. This is something we kind of backed into. We backed into because we treasure our own history, because we have museums that you all as taxpayers help support to preserve our history, and the fact that we can help other people do that for theirs is something I think that does us proud and well as Americans. Thank you. I think we have 2 minutes and 21 seconds for any questions. Yes, ma'am.
It seems like when there's a disaster, whether it's an earthquake or a hurricane, you kind of have to triage people, nature, wildlife, culture.
Yeah.
Do you go in on your own, or does someone tell you, no, you can't go in now? And, is there someone above these entities that, stops you from proceeding?
Yeah, so the question is, these situations, you got to triage the situation, and who tells who to go in, and how do you organize this? So the U.S., for international crises, is not really well organized, but now that law that Obama signed, actually there's now a coordinating committee to help do that. So for the first time ever, when we went to Haiti, we did it. We got a lot of pushback from people in the U.S. Embassy. They didn't want us to necessarily do this, but the military did. So there wasn't really a coordinated U.S. policy in that. Domestic, it's more clear because FEMA really is in charge, and we co-chair with FEMA the National Heritage Task Force. So we're in very direct discussion. But typically, again, culture is coming after life. I mean, the first thing is to save people's lives. Everybody understands that. So you can't be in too far ahead of the curve, and you got to pick your time when you're going to do it. Same thing like with diesel fuel for Puerto Rico. The most important thing for fuel in Puerto Rico is, hospitals and care of people and, food and stuff. And, the amount of diesel fuel we were providing for culture is really spit in the ocean. But again, you don't want it to be the first thing you're doing the first day. So coming in after a few weeks, yes?
Why was the embassy resistant to your
Well, I think it was the particular leadership. It wasn't the ambassador. The ambassador was that. It was the charge d'affaires. And they really didn't understand the whole notion of culture. They just thought it was frivolous. It was like entertainment. You know, and to me, that was a big misreading of what keeps a people going. Look, when you have a disaster, that's not when you stop praying. That's when you pray the most. That's when your religion and your culture really comes in. You need it because you're facing disaster. So helping people, you know, we saw in Nepal after the earthquake, where all these buildings, all these temples, I don't know if somebody may have been in Kathmandu. You have all those beautiful wooden temples, they all collapsed. The Nepalis were coming the very next day. They'd lost family members. They were bringing flowers to do puja at the collapsed site because they were still sacred. And so that need doesn't go away. But you have some people that, you know, just don't understand that aspect of it. But the military did. God bless General Keane. He got it immediately. Okay, I think we're 50 seconds. One more question? Yes.
You know, the scope of your work has grown so much. You said the other day that the government only gives you a certain amount of money and then you raise it. So has your budget gotten bigger for the government to give you more money for all of this?
Yeah, so the question is, you know, we have just like other, Smithsonian is a semi-government agency. We get about 60% of our support from the US government. Has our budget expanded to do this? A little, actually. So Congress has given us a little more money, recognizing that this is a continual need, whether it be in natural disasters or in conflict situations. The lion's share of the money, though, has come from corporations and foundations. So places like the Mellon Foundation that really supports culture and the conservation of culture, they've put up money. And I think it was yesterday that Bank of America announced at Davos that it was giving the Smithsonian $1 million to help in this work. So, you know, I think people see that this is a good thing. And again, as I say, I think it does us well as Americans to show that we're a country, among others, that respects who people are. And this is a way of doing that. Thank you.